This is a BMW 1 Series. More specifically, this is my E87 BMW 130i. And in this episode of Jack Talks Cars, I'm going to explain to you why I believe it's one of BMW's greatest hot hatches. The BMW 1 Series broke the mould back in 2004 when it was released. It was quite a unique prospect amongst all of its hatchback competitors, as even the entry-level cars stuck to that tried and tested BMW recipe of sending drive to the rear wheels. It was marketed as a practical sports car, all of the luxuries, build qualities and characteristics you'd expect of the wider BMW range, but in a compact family hatch. It was clear that the Bavarians had their eyes set squarely on the likes of the Ford Focus, the Volkswagen Golf and the Audi A3, and they were deadly serious about taking market segment. And you know what? It's worked, because there are now some 390,000 BMW 1 Series registered here in the UK. And the 1 Series badge is as well known in households as the original BMW 3 Series name. One of the greatest success stories to come from the BMW 1 Series lineup was the last generation BMW M140i. It's haloed by petrol heads as one of the greatest modern BMWs money can buy. The reasoning for that was it was powered by a 3-litre straight-six turbocharged engine. It sent the drive to the rear wheels, and it came with a manual gearbox, something none of its competitors could offer. Today, BMW have joined the masses with their latest 1 Series performance car. It comes in the form of the M135i, which is now a 4-wheel drive 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. And whilst the car itself is much more practical and performs just as well as the original M140i, it hasn't been as very well received. But the fact of the matter is, rear-wheel drive just was wasted on the general public. It's not something many people would have taken advantage of. With the arrival of this new M135i X-Drive, the spotlight was cast back on previous generation 1 Series, and that is where this example, the 130i, enters the frame. This is the first proper performance 1 Series BMW ever produced. Now, what makes the 130i so special? BMW took their rather fantastic 3-litre straight-six engine, retuned it to produce 265 brake horsepower and 235 Nm of torque, and then proceeded to shoehorn it into the shortest wheelbase they could find, which was the 1 Series hatch. Now, those figures, even by today's standards, are pretty impressive. But when it was new, they were even more significant. This was the most powerful 3-litre 6-cylinder BMW had ever produced outside of their M division. And it was in fact the most powerful engine under the bonnet of any non-M BMW on sale at the time. The only BMW you could buy with more power was the E46 M3. With a fact sheet as good as that, you'd have thought driving enthusiasts would have jumped all over this car and it would have sold in high numbers. But according to the chaps down at howmanyleft.com, the 130i was so overlooked. There are in fact less than 1,000 of these cars registered on UK roads today, and they make up less than 1% of the entire BMW model mix. So what's wrong with it? Why didn't it sell in huge numbers? Well, from a family hatchback perspective, there's actually quite a lot wrong. These rear seats, for example, I mean, I'm 6'3", and there's no way I'm fitting in here with my seat set in my driving position. With it being rear-wheel drive as well, the centre seat is pretty much redundant as the drivetrain travels right the way through the back passenger seats. And with that, the boot is actually very small. Today though, the 130i actually represents quite a tantalising prospect. The value of these cars varies quite drastically, but then so does the condition. Ropey ones with high mileage and many owners and questionable service history will probably set you back around £3,500. Mint examples are selling for around £8,000. This particular one here, which is a very good usable daily drive, this one set me back £5,800. Now, in the interest of fairness, I should probably state that this car wasn't standard when I bought it. One of the previous owners has spent quite a lot of money maintaining it, updating it and looking after it. And whilst the modification list isn't all that extensive, They're all modifications that I believe make the perfect 130i. The original leather M Sport gear stick has been swapped for a BMW Performance aluminium suede unit. The M Sport suspension has been replaced for a Bilstein B12 Sportline kit, which lowers the car ever so slightly. All the run flat tyres have been replaced with a set of Michelin Pilot Sport 4s. Under the bonnet, there's now a BMW Performance carbon intake. And finally, there's a couple of visual modifications, including the BMW Aero spoiler and Darkline LED rear lights. So as you just heard then, when you start the car up, that 6-cylinder engine makes an absolutely fantastic noise when it throbs into life. And when you're driving it, it still pulls, to me anyway, as if the day it was new. It's got a 7,000 RPM limit, and when you really drive it with any enthusiasm, it can still make you smile. My car is fitted with a 6-speed manual, although there are flappy paddle automatic options available. I personally would opt for the manual every time because it's much more desirable to the driving enthusiast, and it gives you a much more engaging driving experience, which is what you want from a hot hatch. Now, as I've mentioned, this here is a LCI model, BMW 130i, which means it's the facelift model, and it comes with the electronic power steering. If you do any research out there on the BMW 130i, you're probably going to come across some threads and articles that talk about the hydraulic power steering being far superior. Now, I can't comment on that. I've not driven one with hydraulic power steering, but what I can say is the electronic power steering in this car is precise. It gives just enough feedback to make sure you feel safe. And the turning is really accurate. I don't feel like this car could handle much better than it already does. Now, with the car being rear-wheel drive, it feels absolutely brilliant when you plant your foot through the corners. The car feels as if it's pushing you out of them and gives it a really, really sporty feel, which is the main selling point to a BMW, really, and was the main reason why this should have been a much better seller over its competitors, such as the Golf GTI with its front-wheel drive setup. Now, my particular car might feel a little bit over-dampened because of the B12 Sportline kit that I've had fitted, but even at moderate speeds, it still feels composed and compliant. It makes, for me anyway, a brilliant daily drive, because it's just as happy bimbling along these country roads at 30, 40 miles an hour as it is out on a spirited drive around some of the twistiest, bendiest B roads. This is a car that has bags of character. It's got that oversized, overpowered engine up front, this absolutely beautiful feeling, slick gear change, and that really, really well-balanced and well-designed rear drive chassis that BMW have renowned for putting together. For me, this is a car that should have sold in much higher numbers, because it's definitely more interesting than the equivalent Golf GTI, better equipped and better looking than the Focus ST, and far cheaper to run, own and insure than the equivalent Audi S3. And I mean, you just have to listen to this engine. What's not to love?